Imagine a battleship the size of a mountain, built entirely from a frozen mixture of ice and sawdust. Picture a tiny, ordinary bat taking flight to deliver an incendiary bomb deep inside an enemy city. Imagine a cutting-edge guided missile, steered not by complex electronics, but by 3 trained pigeons pecking at a screen. This is not science fiction. This is the classified, bizarre, and often unbelievable reality of World War II. In the unforgiving crucible of global conflict, where victory and annihilation hung in the balance, the line between genius and madness vanished. Military necessity gave birth to weapons so strange, so desperate, that their blueprints were often locked away and forgotten, deemed too ludicrous, or perhaps too volatile for history. Tonight, we pull back the curtain on this secret archive. We explore the projects born of the highest intellect and the deepest desperation, the weapons that almost changed the war, and the strange inventions that define the age of desperate genius. War is a machine of consumption. It devours men, metal, and resources, but most profoundly, it consumes ideas. The sheer, desperate necessity of global conflict becomes a crucible, forging weapons from the deepest corners of the human imagination. In the brutal, unforgiving theater of World War II, the urgency to gain even the slightest edge pushed scientists, engineers, and even eccentric thinkers to propose solutions that bordered on science fiction. These were the strange inventions of World War II, the forgotten tools and concepts that, had they been fully realized, might have changed the course of history, or simply made it far, far stranger.
In 1942, the Battle of the Atlantic was reaching a brutal, feverish peak. German U-boats, the Grey Wolves, were hunting Allied convoys with devastating effectiveness, often operating out of range of air cover. The Allies needed mid-ocean landing strips to protect their vital supply lines, but conventional steel aircraft carriers were expensive, slow to build, and constantly needed in other theaters. Then came the extraordinary idea, championed by the brilliant but often volatile inventor Geoffrey Pike. His vision was simple. If steel was scarce, why not build a ship out of ice? The proposal was brought to the highest levels of the British establishment, eventually landing on the desk of Prime Minister Winston Churchill himself. Pike argued for a colossal, unsinkable aircraft carrier, over 2,000 feet long, longer than any ship ever conceived, that could operate in the Atlantic. Its sheer size and ability to absorb torpedo hits made it theoretically invincible. But the plan had a problem. Regular ice cracks, melts, and is easily shattered. Pike had a solution: pikerete. Pikerete was a compound of 14% wood pulp and 86% water. The wood fibers acted like steel reinforcement bars in concrete. Pikerete could be molded, was slower to melt than ice, and astonishingly, it was far stronger than concrete. A block of pikerete could stop a bullet. Churchill was instantly captivated, describing the potential carrier as being capable of weathering the heaviest storms. The project was immediately classified and given the code name Habakkuk. A massive engineering challenge commenced. Plans called for a vessel displacing 2.2 million tons, armed with 40 twin-barrel anti-aircraft guns and a crew of nearly 4,000 men. To keep this monstrous vessel frozen, an elaborate refrigeration system was required, with a network of air ducts channeling cold air throughout the entire structure. The Allies even began building a small-scale prototype on Patricia Lake in Alberta, Canada. Measuring 60 feet long and weighing 1,000 tons, the team successfully demonstrated that pikerete could be worked and that the refrigeration system could maintain its structure.
However, as the months turned into years, the war shifted. The development of long-range aircraft, especially the American B-24 Liberator, equipped with radar and capable of covering the mid-Atlantic gap, lessened the need for stationary airfields. Crucially, the cost of the Habakkuk project spiraled out of control. It would have required more steel for the internal refrigeration and support structure than the Allies could afford to divert from conventional warships. By late 1943, the U-boat threat was largely neutralized. The necessity that had birthed the idea of an ice ship had vanished. Project Habakkuk, the monumental, icy dream, was officially shelved. The prototype on Patricia Lake was left to slowly melt, a ghostly, half-submerged relic of one of the war's strangest gambits. From the colossal to the infinitesimal, the next invention demonstrates how far military planners were willing to push the boundaries of conventional warfare. This is the story of Project X-ray, better known as the Bat Bomb. The idea originated not from a military strategist, but from a dental surgeon named Dr. Lytle S. Adams, a friend of First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. He proposed harnessing one of nature's smallest, most prolific creatures, the Mexican free-tailed bat, to deliver incendiary destruction. The concept was fiendishly simple and strategically brilliant. Bats hibernate in vast numbers. They can carry a load 3 times their own weight, and they are masters of infiltration. The plan was to attach tiny, delayed-action napalm canisters to millions of hibernating bats, pack them into bomb-shaped casings, and drop them from high-flying B-25 bombers over enemy cities, specifically targeting Japanese urban centers, which were largely constructed of highly flammable wood and paper. As the casings dropped, they would deploy parachutes, open mid-air, and release the bats. The bats, awakened by the heat and altitude, would instinctively fly to the nearest dark, sheltered hiding spot, the attics, eaves, and internal structures of buildings. After a set delay, the incendiary device, called the H2 unit, would ignite, simultaneously starting thousands of fires deep within the structure of the city. President Roosevelt himself approved the project in 1942, reportedly fascinated by the fantastic scheme. The project was given high priority, with a budget that eventually ballooned to $2 million. The challenges were numerous and often comical. Engineers struggled to find a way to attach the tiny, volatile bombs. Scientists had to figure out how to transport and successfully deploy millions of live, hibernating bats. The project reached its peak during tests conducted at the Carlsbad Airfield Base in New Mexico. On one memorable test day, live bats were loaded with dummy bombs, but a number of them escaped. They quickly flew to the nearest wooden structure and began roosting. That structure turned out to be the general's own car hangar. The resulting explosion and fire not only destroyed the general's car, but also the entire facility. The final straw came when the U.S. Navy and Army Air Forces lost interest. The project was handed over to the Army Chemical Warfare Service in 1944 and eventually terminated. Why? Because the development of the atomic bomb, the ultimate weapon of strategic fire, overshadowed all other attempts at mass urban destruction. The Bat Bomb, a weapon of biological sabotage, was shelved, deemed too slow and perhaps too unreliable compared to the nuclear option. Yet it remains a chilling reminder of the extraordinary lengths to which science went in the pursuit of a wartime edge. Under the enormous weight of wartime pressure, sometimes the most unconventional minds offered the most unusual solutions. One such proposal came from a Harvard behavioral psychologist who was already revolutionizing his field, B.F. Skinner. Skinner believed that the precision required for guided weaponry was not best served by unreliable early electronics, but by the highly trainable brains of common animals, specifically pigeons. This was Project Pigeon, or officially Project Orcon, Organic Control. Skinner's hypothesis was that if a pigeon could be trained to distinguish a specific target on a screen, its instinctual pecking could be translated into steering commands for a missile. The concept centered around the fact that pigeons are highly visual and possess excellent eyesight. The weapon would be a glide bomb or a missile equipped with a nose cone that functioned as a visual guidance system. Inside, a screen would display the image of the target below. 3 pigeons would be secured inside, facing the screen, each acting as a highly sensitive biomechanical sensor. During training, the pigeons were meticulously conditioned using positive reinforcement. If they pecked at the image of the target, they received a tiny reward of grain. They were trained to focus on ships, bridges, or buildings displayed on the screen. The result was startling. The pigeons became highly accurate, keeping the target firmly within the center of the screen with incredible consistency. In the missile's operation, 3 pigeons were used for redundancy and accuracy. If they all consistently pecked at the center of the target image, the steering vanes on the missile would remain steady. If the target drifted to the right, the pecking on the right side of the screen would trigger a small correction, nudging the missile back on course. The system was ingenious in its simplicity and relied on a biological processor that was far more reliable than the complex, often temperamental vacuum tubes and sensors of the 1940s. Testing proved the system worked. The pigeons maintained remarkable fidelity to the target, even under simulated flight conditions involving sudden dips and rolls. The National Defense Research Committee, NDRC, officially funded the project, seeing the clear potential of a fire-and-forget weapon that needed no radio communication, which could easily be jammed.
Despite the technical success and the demonstrated accuracy of the avian navigators, the military establishment could not overcome what they saw as the project's central flaw: the optics. Asking a colonel or a general to bet the fate of a crucial mission on 3 pecking birds was simply too much to accept. The humor and sheer oddity of the concept overshadowed the technical prowess. Furthermore, as the war progressed, the focus shifted rapidly. The dawn of the true electronic age was arriving, with developments in radar and, critically, the advent of proximity fuses and more sophisticated guidance systems. Though Project Pigeon was briefly reactivated by the U.S. Navy in 1948, it was ultimately deemed impractical for mass deployment. The idea of the pigeon-guided missile was shelved, not because it failed to work, but because military leadership simply found the notion too bizarre to integrate into their high-stakes arsenal. The necessity of breaching Hitler's Atlantic Wall, the monumental coastal defense line, bred an entire class of bizarre, specialized invasion vehicles. Among these was an invention so spectacular, so loud, and so utterly uncontrollable that its very existence seems ripped from a cartoon. This was the Great Panjandrum. The British Directorate of Miscellaneous Weapons Development, responsible for a variety of peculiar gadgets, conceived of the Panjandrum as a massive, high-speed, self-propelled demolition charge. Its sole purpose was to blast an opening through the formidable concrete and steel obstacles that the Allies knew awaited them on the shores of Normandy. The Panjandrum was essentially 2 massive wooden wheels, 10 feet high, strapped together by an axle covered in 4,000 pounds of Amatol high explosive. The entire monstrous contraption was to be propelled by a series of powerful, solid-fuel rockets attached to the rims of the wheels. The plan was terrifyingly ambitious. The weapon would be launched from a landing craft several hundred yards offshore, ignite its rockets, race across the sand at speeds up to 60 miles per hour, and explode upon impact with the concrete seawall. The weapon's name itself was a reference to a nonsensical line in a famous 18th century literary parody, which perfectly suited the ridiculous sight it presented in testing. The Panjandrum was tested repeatedly on the beaches of Westward Ho in Devon. The first test was a disaster, a spectacle of chaotic energy. When the rockets were ignited, instead of driving the wheel straight, they fired unevenly, sending the Panjandrum spinning in erratic, unpredictable arcs. It would veer violently, sometimes crashing, sometimes rolling harmlessly into the sea. On one notorious occasion, its volatile rockets snapped free and scattered, shooting high into the air, while the main explosive charge cartwheeled towards a group of watching senior military officials and press. They were forced to dive for cover, narrowly escaping disaster. The engineers made adjustments, including adding a second set of rockets and a heavy stabilizing third wheel, a tiller, but the erratic behavior continued. The machine simply could not be directed with the precision required for a massive D-Day assault. It was quietly shelved, leaving the job of beach obstacle clearance to more traditional and less explosive methods.
Meanwhile, beneath the dark waves of the Atlantic, a far more effective and subtle revolution in weaponry was taking place: the development of the first true fire-and-forget smart weapons. These were the acoustic homing torpedoes, and their use immediately changed the deadly chess game played between Allied convoys and German U-boats. German scientists developed the G7E's torpedo, chillingly nicknamed the Zaunkönig, or Wren, by the Allies. It was a passive acoustic weapon, meaning it did not emit any signal, but instead listened for one. After being launched, it would follow a straight path for 400 meters to clear the U-boat that launched it, and then its acoustic sensors would activate. These sensors were tuned to home in on the low-frequency, high-decibel sound of a ship's propellers. Upon its debut, the Zaunkönig was devastatingly effective. It rendered the traditional evasive maneuvering of escort ships obsolete. It didn't matter if the destroyer zigzagged or sped up. The torpedo would simply track the loudest sound source, the propellers, and steer itself to impact. The Allies quickly lost several escort vessels, forcing a rapid, desperate search for a countermeasure. The countermeasure came in the form of the Foxer decoy. This device, towed behind a ship, consisted of two clanging metal pipes designed to emit a loud, distorted noise that was significantly louder than the ship's own propellers. The Zaunkönig torpedoes would reliably abandon their pursuit of the real ship and home in on the noisy, harmless decoy. This simple, elegant solution nullified the German acoustic advantage, turning the tide once more. The Americans were also working on their own version, the Mark 24 mine, affectionately codenamed Fido. Despite being called a mine to maintain secrecy, Fido was an airdropped acoustic homing torpedo designed to be launched by patrol aircraft. Like its German counterpart, it would circle until it detected the sound of a submarine's propellers, then strike. Fido proved to be one of the most successful submarine-killing weapons of the war. It was responsible for sinking 37 U-boats and damaging 18 others, marking a profound shift in anti-submarine warfare. These acoustic torpedoes, whether German or American, represented a fundamental leap in military technology.
For the final invention, we turn back to the desperate ingenuity of the British people facing the very real threat of invasion. When the German panzers seemed unstoppable and Britain's regular army was severely depleted, the civilian volunteer force, the Home Guard, needed a simple, easily manufactured anti-tank weapon. What they received was the No. 74 grenade, commonly known as the sticky bomb. The sticky bomb was the essence of desperate simplicity. It consisted of a glass flask containing a powerful gel explosive, covered by a stockinette shroud coated in a very powerful, highly adhesive cement. The user was meant to pull a pin, which released the shroud, exposing the sticky surface. The soldier then had to rush forward and press the bomb firmly against the hull of an enemy tank, where the glue would hold it in place long enough for the 4-second fuse to detonate. The concept was terrifying for the user and ludicrous in its execution. The adhesive was so strong that soldiers risked getting stuck to the bomb themselves, especially if they fumbled the exposed device. Furthermore, the tank's effectiveness relied entirely on the enemy tank being clean. If the tank was covered in the mud, dust, or grime of the battlefield, which was almost always the case, the sticky bomb would simply fall off. There were also widespread concerns over reliability and safety. Home Guard training films often demonstrated the comedy inherent in the device, showing soldiers struggling to deploy it safely. Despite its comical drawbacks, over 2.5 million sticky bombs were produced.
It was a weapon born of desperation and a never-say-die attitude. Although its actual use against enemy tanks was limited, the sticky bomb perfectly symbolizes the resourcefulness and the bizarre lengths to which Britain went to arm its citizens against overwhelming odds. These 6 inventions, the icy carrier, the bat bomber, the pigeon missile, the rolling bomb, the acoustic hunter, and the adhesive grenade, stand as monuments to the boundless creativity and the utter strangeness of war. They are the stories of what happens when humanity's greatest minds are tasked with finding the impossible solution to an existential threat. Most of these projects failed, not due to a lack of effort, but because the war itself progressed faster than their development, or because their concepts were simply too far beyond the prevailing military imagination. Yet their underlying principles, harnessing unconventional forces, leveraging biological control, and utilizing advanced material science, all demonstrate that even in the strangest corners of classified history, the seeds of future innovation were being sown. The Second World War was truly the age of desperate genius, where the line between brilliant innovation and glorious madness was thinner than a sheet of blueprints.
Thanks for joining me on this journey through history's most eccentric inventions. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment about your favorite invention, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing content. See you next time.